you guys before then. So if you're still waiting, just hang on and we'll eventually get to you here. Thanks for calling in on this Valentine's Day evening. I want to go to next Paul in Savannah, Georgia. I think has an
Paul.
interesting
How are
story.
you?
Hey, Paul, what's going on?
Hello, how are you?
Doing all right, Paul. How about yourself?
I could be doing better, I feel.
Okay. So I have a note here from the call screener that said you had some recent life-changing experiences.
Yes, I've had, in the last 5 months, I've had 4 heart attacks.
4 heart attacks?
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yes.
Wow.
And it started off with three angioplasties to try to stop the clotting, but they all occluded and fell apart. So I ended up having to go through open heart surgery as the last resort.
Holy.
Now,
Wow.
during the first couple of cardiac events, I looked to my Bible, I looked to friends and family. But the night when the doctor came and said, we're going to have to keep you and you're going to have open heart surgery. And I remember saying to myself, like, wow, this is bad. So the night before I went to sleep in the hospital, I've gone a bunch of meds. And I have to include the fact that I am a paranoid schizophrenic, and my medication was getting a little. I wasn't taking the psych meds, so I started saying to myself, if I survive this open heart surgery, that I am no more taking any psych meds, and I want to let my mind be its mind. Just because being on psychotropic medication for 24, 25 years, I've forgotten who I was inside before all of this. People used to tell me, you were wild, you never want to listen, or you always have the answers. So that night, before I lay down, I talked to what I felt like was the God that I served. And I told him, I said, if I wake up tomorrow after this surgery, I will no longer know you. I want you to know that. I want to leave you from my previous world. I need a new world without you because the world with you has been chaotic and full of pain. So, needless to say, I pulled through. And in the recovery room, everyone's like, oh, God is great, God is great. And I'm just looking at everyone like, please, like, disappear. I wanted everybody to just disappear so I can just be alone with my new self.
Paul, do you identify as an atheist?
I don't know just yet.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't. It's kind of hard to say because I don't really believe in a whole lot of things. Some people say, okay, there's no evidence for God. There's no proof that you can't exist, that he does. It's a lot of things that I don't understand when it comes down to proving and disproving the existence of God. And I don't put God as, oh, he's the sun or he's energy. I use the man-made term as God. And I no longer serve a God. But it's been really hard to making that transitioning with my friends and especially with my family.
Yeah.
I lost my job. Due to my condition. They're putting me on disability. And I'm refusing to use my psych med because I see life so much clearer. And the fact that I took, and also the fact that I took, sugar out of my diet as well.
Okay. Paul, can I ask a question? I don't want to sound like I'm being a bit rude or condescending, but does your psychologist know you've gone off these medications?
I was going to ask that as well. Okay, yeah.
Yes. And you're doing it under. So you're doing it under medical supervision.
Yes, he told me that I needed to take it
Mhm.
simply because
Yeah.
it would help me interact better with society.
Yeah,
But I
Okay.
realized
that
I
should have been the
don't.
first
Yeah.
thing I asked. But yeah, absolutely. I was curious to know.
Yes, I interact better with society now that I have a sense of myself.
Hmm.
Just because I don't talk to someone, I just don't share the same views as they. And it can say hi and bye, but when they start talking about the goodness of the God and all, I just kind of like, okay, see you later, bye bye. You know, oh, you don't want to talk about God? Like, nah, I'm good. So it's just
The thing is, it's good that it's working for you and that you're doing it under the guise of a medical doctor. But if you weren't, I would be very concerned because I have ADHD. I also take
okay.
psychotropic drugs to help me work along with my brain to make my life work. And if I don't take that and take them, I do actually not function very well.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and I actually have quite mild ADHD. I don't have it nearly as bad as some other people I know. And yeah, I ended up running out of the script, and my psychologist was on holiday, so I actually stopped taking it for a while, and my life
Okay.
for a bit was a bit chaotic. So I do recommend anyone who is taking psychotropic drugs to please stick with it. And if you want to wean yourself off, that's perfectly okay, but make sure you're doing it under the guise of a medical practitioner because those things
Right.
are there to help your life. But I'm really glad to hear that your life seems to have improved. And
Yes.
in that case, I would probably
I've been
say,
off the
because
meds for
I also work with people with disability, you probably needed a medication review as well. So I just wanted to put out that little bit of a disclaimer out there for those people is just if you're not working very well on a medication, go back to your doctor and say, this isn't working very well for me. Is there anything else that we can do? Because
right.
medication
So
reviews need to be done almost on a yearly basis. And there's some people
right.
I know who've been on the same medication for 14 years and never had a medication review. So,
Right. So
yeah.
and it's been about 9 months since I've had my last dose of my psychotic medication. So I'm dealing with to give you a brief synopsis about how I feel when I do take them. When I take my medication, I believe almost everything that you tell me. I'm very submissive. You can tell me the sky is green, and just because I trust you so much, I believe that it is green. And
Yeah.
when I am off my medication, I do more critical thinking on my own. I tend to look at the world as if it was created for everyone and everything, and not just one species.
Okay.
So sometimes the extreme that I get when I'm off my meds, when I just get off my meds, I cry. I go to the park and people have their dogs on leashes and I cry and I apologize to the dogs. Like, I'm so sorry they got you like this. It's so bad. You should be free. But I don't set them free. I just feel like human has just owned everything. And it saddens me sometimes to feel like we are so superior, but I really feel like we are superior in our rights. I feel like in every aspect of every element, there is a part of it that is just special. Even with the planets.
Okay.
I feel like Earth. Okay.
I want to focus in on something just a little bit, Paul, if you don't mind me asking. I want to kind of go back
I
to
don't mind.
the question of God of, because there's people who call in and they tell me, or at least have told me in the past, like, I prayed for something to happen and I prayed to God and this thing happened for me and therefore I believe, right? So their belief is is based on an experience that they've had that they can point to and say, okay, because of this experience, this confirmed to me this is thing. And this is interesting because you're telling me you had almost the opposite experience. You prayed to God, and because of a lack of an answer, you determined that God either isn't real or isn't what you thought it was, at least. And so your perspective on that issue is kind of changed. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So, I'm just interested because what would you say to folks who have these experiences who say, oh, I had this thing and then it was confirmed to me that, God spoke to me or God did this. You're not having these kinds of experiences. And obviously, Nervardia and I aren't really having these experiences either. But how did you change from that? Because it sounds at least to me that it's not the first time you've ever prayed. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But you seem to have had a communication with God before. At least that's the reason why you talked to him. So how did that change? What's the nature of that?
Things had gotten really bad for me, really bad. And I used to turn on the news just so I can hear and see things worse than the situation that I was in. But I also realized that, those are human beings and they're going through things, and as a whole. I was like, they're supposed to be a God to change all this. And I just felt like I had waited long enough and there was no answer. And I can't sit here and knock at a door that no one answers. And I'm not going to just go in the door because it's not my house. Anything can happen,
Yeah.
Just walk away.
So it's kind of like the problem of evil was a big thing for you, right? That evilness exists in the world and something wasn't being done about it. And also just in your personal life, things weren't happening for you in the way that you had.
Paul, I also want to say suffering is relative. So, I live in an amazing non-existent country, but I have my down days, I have my bad days. And the fact that somebody else is having a worse time, yes, is there, and we need to accept and understand that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you yourself are having a shitty day.
Yes.
Something that I go through, a shitty day for me would be heaven for someone else. And I accept and understand that, but I still also need to accept and understand that I'm still having a shitty day.
Yes, I do.
I think we don't recognize that enough, and it is kind of almost victim blaming, I think. It's sort of like, oh, well, you can't have a shitty day because, you've got food in your stomach. And it's like, yeah, well, I just got beaten up by someone. That's a shitty thing to happen to you. I'm sorry for swearing, by the way.
Yeah.
That's all right. This is not a family program. I've
Yeah, so I can see where you're coming from. Just try not to feel that guilt of having, there's other people who are going through worse. I should feel better in my life, because that's a terrible way of thinking, in my opinion, because you need to also respect the fact that you yourself are having a terrible day.
So I recently moved into a home, and my next door neighbor, she came to introduce herself, and she said, what kind of work do you do? And I said, well, I'm a peer specialist, for a mental hospital. So she said, peer specialist, what is that? I said, well, I deal with people who, have schizophrenia, bipolarism and schizoaffectivism. And so she says, so she's I'm a Christian, and I was like, oh, okay. So she said, yeah, you deal with people who talk to themselves and imagine things that are not there. And I was like, yeah, just like Christian.
Just like Christian.
Really, she looked at me and she was like, well, not really. I was like, oh, can you explain the difference? You talk to things that aren't there. I talk to things that aren't there, but at least I know that they aren't there because I have a condition that confirms that they're not there. So
also,
we're going to talk. Go ahead.
Also, I'm just going to point out, in the DSM-5, being religious is not considered to be a mental illness. So, yes, sorry for cutting you off there. I'm just making it.
No problem.
Yeah, there is.
But it's like she was trying to down me because of, oh, you talk to yourself, or you deal with people who talk to themselves. And I took offense because, some of my patients, they can't help it.
Sure.
So I
Yeah,
kind of
that is inherently offensive.
Yeah.
What she said.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, this idea of Christians kind of talking to themselves, I think, the way that we characterize it, we kind of make these comparisons to like paranoid schizophrenia, but really the way I see it, I think, in my opinion, it's more of like a group trance. What I mean by that is I think we're all sharing a narrative that is kind of developed in group. These things typically, they do happen on their own sometimes. People are like, oh, I'm talking to God, and they start their own thing, and some people go wild with it. But most people, when they're talking to God, they're doing it in church, or they're doing it to pray right before a meal, or maybe they're having a hard time, and it's a coping mechanism for them, and they talk, and
right. And I do believe that they feel like they're talking to someone, and but I just feel like, it's just something that makes them feel better to talk to someone of a higher power. So, but I don't feel that anymore.
Well, that's really interesting, Paul. That is super, super interesting. Like, I want to know where you're going from here, because it sounds like you're still figuring some stuff out. I would love in the future for you to call back and so we can figure out where you're going at. For now, I want to get to some other callers, but I do want to thank you for calling into the show today and sharing your experiences, because that is just, that is a very poignant story. If I could tell somebody, be like, yeah, I just prayed to God to do this thing, it didn't happen, so like I just don't believe anymore. Like that will make people nervous when you tell stories like that, right? Because people are conditioned to respond as, well, God doesn't answer all these kinds of prayers. God works in his own time. God works in mysterious ways. There's immediate gut reactions that people will have to that. And, I imagine in some circles, that's going to be harder to talk about in your experiences, because people are, like I said, conditioned to respond